What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of At Home with Mark. Today, season 9, episode 4.
All
And
right.
since I've started this show in 2020, I've been watching Mr. Adam Dorn. When you and Charlie would get on Instagram and chat, I loved that stuff. So I've been wanting to talk to you for like 4 years. So this is like 4 years in the making. So thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me, man, and thanks for watching those. When the world shut down, those those Instagram lives. I didn't even know what Instagram lives was until I didn't even know that was it. And Charlie and I got to speaking just on the phone. We talk all the time, and I was like, do you want to do one of these Instagram lives and just have like a phone conversation, but just do it live so our friends can like razz us and like jump in? And then we ended up doing it for months because, of course, look what we went through. And it was like we started realizing that we needed it, and the folks that were listening were so supportive and fun, and they needed it. We all needed a sense of community since we were, torn apart as a result of the pandemic. So I'm glad you saw it, and I'm glad we're here. I'm glad we're all here right now.
Dude, for
It was
real,
a
man.
tough time. That was a rough period of time.
Oh my God, man. It's like I think about that all the time because my daughter was, you know, she was in 4th grade or 3rd grade when it happened.
Oh yeah.
And dude, like it's just to think back, like, what is she gonna say to her kids? Like when they hear about the pandemic of 2020, you know what I mean? It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
And people still lament the fact they're like, oh, kids were separated from each other and there's all these effects. And I'm just like, no, kids are pretty strong. Like they got back to school and they seem like they're kids. They're still kids, like
They're resilient, dude. If anything was super fucked with is my dog. Like he got so protective of us because it was just us, and him for a while. So he's got some weird stuff where he's super. I mean, like he's my shadow, but like if I'm with him and we're out and someone else is walking, oh nice. Oh yeah, I've seen your dog.
Speaking of shadows,
right? But you know how it's like sometimes like they like imprint on somebody, and he's definitely like my guy, and he's like super protective. But that's the only thing that I noticed was really wackadoo about the pandemic around us. It's crazy.
Wow. Was he a puppy when the pandemic hit, or was he? How old was he?
No, he was 3.
Oh yeah, so that's
2.5.
Yeah, we got a puppy during the pandemic, and because we couldn't properly socialize him, he's only just now come into like there's stranger danger was a big thing for him. Like he would freak out and get mad, but now he's kind of cool.
Okay. I'm gonna have to talk to you. How did you do that?
Yeah, honestly, I don't really know. Like it was just patience and getting him calmly. This is a great topic, by the way, to segue into slap bass.
Yeah. Hey, we're all humans.
And bass, yeah.
Well, so let me start with my normal spiel then, Adam. Because dude, I love this question because it goes in so many different directions, and I'm so curious about people's pathways. But like, can you remember? And you've been around music your whole life, but like, can you remember your earliest musical memory?
Yep. And I love my earliest musical memory because it involves Motown and it involves the Jackson 5, and it is my first human memory, not just a musical memory. My first memory is hearing, and I don't know, it was a vinyl record that the Motown put out that was the Jackson 5 greatest hits, and it's on all streaming channels, but for a while there you couldn't get this. It looks like the Jackson family in this ornate wooden frame that you would see like in the Louvre, like a gold, very almost like Baroque, frame. Not Baroque, Rococo is the better term. And I remember hearing I Want You Back. And I remember just being so little and dancing and just hearing this bum 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 bum, like, so the bass line, the melody, everything, it's it's such an ingrained memory that I actually don't have a lot of memories for the next little while after that, that I actually can say that I have a like a cognitive recall on. I just remember that my father and my mother always said, like, they didn't know what happened, but you just freaked out and were dancing and just let go of everything. I was like a reserve. I was premature baby. Like I was born at like 6 months.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was sickly as a kid, as a very little, up until about 3. And they just were like, "Oh my god, like you heard that record, something about that record." I mean, something about that record. It's an amazing record. Like if
Right.
you're going to come in on a piece of music in the early 1970s, that's a pretty good one.
I'd say so.
Yeah, so it was the Jackson 5, and the wildest thing about that is that my mentor is a guy named Marcus Miller. Unbelievable. You know who Marcus is,
Of
I'm
course,
sure.
yeah,
Music
yeah.
fans. And we kind of it's not his earliest musical memory, but we share the Jackson 5 as this thing of like, this was like life determining. Like he heard the Jackson 5 and he's like, I might want to play some bass. You know what I mean? He heard that Wilton Felder bass line without knowing who Wilton Felder was. And so it was always like, it's always been this thing. I'm like, Jackson 5, like, yep, you know it.
Dude, and
Those
that bass line is probably one of the most infectious bass lines in like history. Like any
yeah.
person that is like a non-musical person immediately knows what that is, you know?
And I don't know if you know the history of the guy that played it, but
I don't.
he was the tenor player in the Crusaders. That's Wilton Felder, who is an unbelievable tenor saxophonist. And when Motown moved to LA, he was just like every once in a while would play bass on stuff. And the problem with the Crusaders was they always had a hard time with bass players because Wilton, the lead guy, like who played the melodies on tenor, could sit down and play better than any bass player they got. So it was just like, can you imagine that? Like you're on the gig and you're like, that's the dude that played I Want You Back. Like, no, sorry, I don't want to fill those shoes. But you're right. You're right, man.
It's crazy because like that song, I mean, I'll always remember that, like hearing that when I was a kid. And that was
Yep.
the first Jackson 5 song where it's like, I think I was introduced to groove.
Yeah.
In general. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Because there is such a heavy groove. Like I could just listen to probably the lead vocal and the bass line, and I don't even need any other instruments, and it would be fine probably. That's how high it stands. I
Yeah.
feel like.
And the beauty of that statement is you just touched on something that my father and I always used to talk about, which was on Motown records in general. If you remove the bass line, they fall apart. Like what I mean, and in this instance, it's Wilton Felder. It's not James Jamerson, but James Jamerson, what he did on the electric bass and what he did on those recordings is like, I don't know, like we could talk about James Jamerson
Easily.
for hours. Like it's mind numbing. My hat is like going nuts. It's mind numbing what the genius, that the counterpoint in those bass lines, the actual counterpoint, like not like some like nonsensical use of the word. The way those bass lines follow the melodies is like mind numbing.
Let me ask you this. I'm always curious about people that I really respect who are also bass players about Jamerson. Is there any Jamerson tune where you think he overplayed?
No.
Okay. I don't either. I have all these arguments all the time with people that are like, man, he overplayed all the time. Like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, we could say the same thing about Paul McCartney if you want to go that direction.
Yeah.
But I don't think he overplayed. I think he played amazingly for the tune. Tell me more about that.
There are a handful of bass players, and they're all studio guys. Jamerson was a studio guy. I mean, he went out on the road with the review, and he would play gigs, at night. But he was always, he just played he was the house bass player up until like Bob Babbitt and like they started moving to LA. A couple other bass players that I'll mention that fall in the same sort of like studio guys. 3 guys I'll mention because you can say they all overplay, and I disagree. Marcus Miller, Pino Palladino, Anthony Jackson, and James Jamerson all play such unbelievably ornate stuff but they do what so many people can't do, where they make all that ornate stuff help the song.
Yeah.
So their brilliance of being studio musicians, in that era, in that golden era when there really was like studio musicians just working for like a big chunk of the 20th century, from the 50s through like the end of the 20th century. I love saying that, the 20th century.
Right.
20th century. Um, you know, I I would also ask you, who's saying? Who are the people that were saying to you they're too busy? Because you know what I mean. Like I get it, and they're ornate and they're intricate bass lines, but like Pino, like through the '80s on stuff, it's just so musical, and he's fighting with synth basses, so he's emulating synth bass, but he's playing a fretless with these, an octaver on his bass. They're very busy bass lines, but they never bother me. I think the curse that you have as a bass player is I'm so influenced by these guys that as a young musician, I tried to emulate them and I didn't have the harmonic knowledge to emulate them. So I'm overplaying. And you know what I mean? So I'm like, and I would actually get angry because I did a lot of slapping as a kid. And I used to sub for Marcus because he'd be like, there's dates I just can't do. And I got my start as a studio musician playing on things. And I'd be like, you got to be careful. Like, you got to be playing the tune and you got to be serving the song and getting your stuff in there, but really serving the song. Like, it's a weird balance that only a handful of musicians, I think, ever really, really get together,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny. I gave up on the whole, like, like Jamerson is busy. No, Jamerson's a genius.
Yeah.
And
Well,
yeah.
that had to inform a lot of like working that young and subbing for Marcus. That had to inform a lot of what you did as you do as a producer too, like to learn those lessons. Like, how did that help you?
It helped me a ton. I got to be honest. I never took a bass lesson with Marcus. I always was. I mean, real quickly, like I'll just give you the background. Like, I wrote him a letter when I was a kid, when I was like 14. I sent it to. He always produced Luther Vandross, so I knew who my father was a record producer, and just growing up in that environment, you're privy to certain. It's like growing up in the dugout, like for your dad manages the Yankees or something. I knew who managed Luther Vandross. He was a guy that was friends with my dad, so I wrote a letter to Marcus, care of Luther's manager, knowing that, well, they're going to talk to Marcus because they're doing deals with him and they're going to visiting the studio. So I sent this letter, right? And it was like this, similar to my personality, very exuberant. Oh my God, I love what you do. Like, we're going to be best friends. Like, we have to know each other. I play just like you, blah, 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 blah. So about 6 months goes by and I get a call one day and it's Marcus. Now, mind you, I grew up in the suburbs of Philly. I had a bunch of friends of mine that were musicians. And we were so into music that we would call each other, and I'd be like, "Hey, is Steven there? This is Lenny White." Like, just making up like someone's. We had this whole thing. Like, I would call him, pretend I was Omar Hakim. I would call him, So I thought it was my buddy Steve Wolf,
Messing with you.
he's responsible for me becoming a musician. I thought it was him, and Marcus was like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "This isn't Marcus." I was like, "This is Wolf. Stop messing with me, man." I'm like. Finally, I just was like, all right, prove it. If you're Marcus Miller, what key is this tune in? Like one of the tunes from his solo record. He made this solo record for Warner Brothers. And he answered it correctly. Wolf, he's a drummer. He would never know. So anyway, long story short, I, as like a 15-year-old, like that's when I first spoke with Marcus. I got it into my head. I knew I was going to be a bass player and I know I was going into music. But I really wanted to be a record producer. I wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps. He wasn't working that much at that time. So he was like, find someone that can mentor you. Like, you grew up in the studio. Like, you're a musician. I'm not a musician. Find a musician that's making records that you just really want to learn from. And I got to be honest, I got so lucky because Marcus could have been like, thrown the letter out. He didn't know. I mean, he kind of knew my dad a little bit, but he didn't owe anybody any favors. He's like, no, this kid wrote me a letter, and it's a pretty positive, like, I want to meet this kid. So I met him, and he handed me his bass, and he's like, show me what you got.
Man.
And I was like, oh, great.
Right. What do you play?
Yeah, I'm like, and I got to play a bass I've never played before. I didn't have a jazz bass. Like I had a crappy Ibanez, like Roadstar too. And we just start jamming. And we're at a studio, and it was just like, wow, I'm like a gopher in a recording studio, high school dropout, scrubbing toilets. And I met my idol who had called me. You want to hear me play? And I threw down. Like I just was like, I really played. And he was like, come by whenever you want. I'm not going to teach you bass, but come by whenever you want. You'll learn whatever you want standing and, sitting in the studio. So I spent 3 years in the studio with Marcus instead of going to like 11th and 12th grade in the first semester of, college. I went to Marcus Miller Tech, and I just watched records get made. As much as I love bass, and as much as I was like obsessed with learning how to play bass, I really wanted to learn how to run a session, work with artists, see how records were made in that era. You know what I mean? So it is funny, like, and we've been friends forever. He always makes fun of my bass playing. Like, he rags on me. It's kind of like a constant pickup basketball game with him. He's very competitive. He rags on me. Like, I was in his band, and he would just rag on me on stage. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so it's not a very fun relationship that way.
Well, there's a brotherhood there. That's like, it's like a sibling.
There is. Yeah.
That's even closer, I would say.
Yeah, he just like. But I rag on him too. Like, we were in Tokyo, and I was in the band. We were playing at the Blue Note there, and he happened to be wearing a really ugly pair of pants that looked like a Jackson Pollock painting. And we were signed to the same label in Japan. Like, I started doing my motion worker thing, and I was signed to a label in Japan, JVC, and I was the opening act. And then I would introduce the musicians. So of course, he's Michael Jordan on the Bulls. He's last, so he's walking up. I had introduced the rest of the band, Poochie Bell, Dean Brown, whatever, and Marcus is walking towards me. And I was like, all right, you going to make fun of me? Guess what? And I said, tonight on Pants, Marcus Miller. And he just went like this. And like, he comes on stage, he picks up his bass. He's like laughing. He's like, you got me. I don't take any shit from him, but we don't hang out all the time. I don't it's not that kind of banter all the time, but yeah.
I think it's great too. Like, honestly, man, taking yourself too seriously sometimes, like, what's the point of that? Like, life's supposed to be fun. Music is supposed to be fun, so let's keep it that way. You know what I mean?
Well, I learned that lesson really early. I used to play. Do you know who Les McCann is?
No.
So Les McCann was he just passed away at the end of last year. Les McCann, and stick a pin in this, because when I get to my top 5 funk records, I'm going to mention his name again. But
okay,
Les McCann, one of the best soul, funky, gospel jazz piano players ever. Like, think Ramsey Lewis, Ahmad Jamal, more jazz. I'll send you some stuff like after this.
I play piano too, and gospel piano is my favorite thing on planet Earth.
Les is the most swingingest, natural, funky piano player ever, that also could sing his ass off. He passed away, but I played with Les when I was like 18, and he and Eddie Harris were a team in the late 60s, and they had this huge hit called Compared to What, and that's Les singing it and playing piano. And my father had produced that record. I knew Les like from when I was a little kid, and when I started playing bass, he would just check in and be like, I hear you can play, man. I hear you're hanging out with Marcus. I hear your old man says this. And he just hired me. He never heard me. He hired me. I was like 18. We played up in Boston at some jazz club. And it was unbelievable, because, and the reason why I'm like, there's a reason for invoking Les. I played with him, and I had been at Berklee School of Music. I'm sorry, I was 19. I had been at Berklee for 1 semester. And, that school in the late 80s, you said music should be fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
music wasn't fun at that school in the late 80s. That curriculum, think about what was I went to Chick Corea Electric Band University, and I'm like a funk soul, like, so I'm sitting there and I'm like, I can play Got a Match and I never want to play this again. Like, why did I learn how to play this? This is not why I came to this school. Those guys are brilliant, don't get me wrong. They're
Right.
genius musicians. But I played with Les, and he was like, he made it about fun. And he made it about, this is a show. These people work their ass off to buy this ticket. We're giving them a good night of good time music. Like, don't overthink this. I don't want to hear a John Coltrane quote on your bass solo. No one came here to hear that. No one gives a shit, So,
That's funny, man. Like, so I didn't tell you this. So I graduated from Berkeley and studied
cool.
songwriting and guitar there. But like when I went there, it was a second undergrad degree for me. So I was going there to have fun.
Where did you go before that? Just if you
to a school in Southern Maryland called Salisbury University, where I just did like an interdisciplinary degree. My dad was a stockbroker. My brother is now a stockbroker.
Okay.
My brother's older than me. And like my dad kind of wanted me to have a backup plan, that whole thing.
That was really common there were older students at Berkeley. That was really, really common.
Yeah. So I had a lot of fun there, but it's funny because if you lose that, it totally it takes the wind out of you. Like, do I really want to be playing music? It gets that bad for some people where it's like, if it's not fun over and over and over and over, that's going to skew your vibe, you know?
Very much so. And honestly, I don't know if you noticed this when you were there. There were a lot of kids that dropped out within the first 3 weeks of school. And there were a lot of kids that dropped out second or third semester. You realize, there are a lot of things you're tasked, when you go to that school at first, or any school, with a lot of different challenges and things to learn. And a lot of people lose sight of what they love. Like when I went to that school, I basically just lived in the ensemble rooms and played every night. Like my thing was like, who am I going to meet here? And who are the best musicians? And I'm just going to play. Like my classes, I feel like I have regret about just like not paying attention. I didn't pay attention. Like I was like, it just didn't, I worked on my reading. I worked on my ears. I played with people. I was in some cool ensembles. Everything else just was like this. I didn't get into the politics of the school. I didn't get into, I didn't try to audition for Singers Showcase and be in the band and like work my way to the American Idol band. I didn't do any of that. So I get it. You want to keep it joyful and you want to keep playing music as something that if you can make it a career, that's amazing. But if you can make it a career and also enjoy it, that's really the goal,
Yeah, dude. 100%. I mean, that's why I love doing this. Because first of all, I love talking to people like yourself I mean, you're just like a musicologist first and foremost. Like every time you post anything and you have great stories to talk about stuff, it's always engaging for me. And like, so for me, and we can segue right into the top 5 records because for me, like I grew up, I'm 45. So when I started playing guitar, it was because of Pearl Jam. It was because of the 90s.
Yeah, man.
And that was my thing, man. Like I fell in love with guitar because of Pearl Jam. And then through my life, my older brother was super into the Dead and Fish, and I got super into jam bands. And that's when I was like, oh my God, look what you can do with guitar. That's not what Pearl Jam's doing.
Right.
You can play all this through composed crazy music that Trey Anastasio writes. And I'm like, whoa. And then, oh my God, who the hell is John Scofield? Oh my God, who the hell is Wayne Krantz? I got so like spun out, just like getting into stuff so deep. And I'm the kind of guy, when I find something I like, I dive deep into it.
That's good. That's what you got to do that with music.
Yeah. But all that to say, I feel like you have this authority on this style of music, like all this R&B soul stuff that I love so much. But I'm a surface layer love kind of thing. Like I don't think I've gone deep enough into it, which I'm sure you could help me with.
Sure. But my top 5 is about to inform what you might be checking out, to be honest.
Right. Yeah. So like, let's talk about that, because I love the stuff that you grew up with, who your dad was and the music you were around and you probably heard in the house and everything, probably really informed who you are today and the music that you love.
Yes.
But tell me a little bit, and we can start if you want to do it in order of your very top favorite one, you can, or if you just want to like this is no in particular order, just tell me what you
Oh
like.
no, I'll do it 5-1. Like
Okay, let's do it.
5-1. So all right, I mentioned Les McCann and Eddie Harris. It's a record that my dad produced. It's called Swiss Movement. I think 4 out of the unfortunately 6 records, and I told you it's a top 6 because 5, 2 are tied.
Okay.
And because I just feel like this Swiss Movement is the name of the Les McCann and Eddie Harris record.
Okay, I'm writing it down.
It is the record that put the Montreux Jazz Festival on the map because that was a fledgling music festival in Switzerland in the late 60s. Les and Eddie were put together basically by my father. They were both on the festival separately. And my father was like, why don't you guys do a set together? Because you do some stuff that really lines up with each other. And what no one knew or could predict is these two guys who had never really played together that did like a 20-minute rehearsal. They recorded a set of music that is this record, Swiss Movement. First of all, the record sold 1 million copies. The lead single, there was a single on it with vocals called Compared to What that just became a smash hit. It's like a civil rights anthem that also is just this infectious groove. The record is it is such an amazing record. And when you said come up with your top 5, I realized that 4 out of these 6 top 5 records are live records.
Oh, okay.
Something about funk and soul music on the live end that just takes it to another level because there's community there and there's people there reacting to these grooves and this funk, and you're just like, it's like a juggernaut and everyone gets caught up in. There's cheering on that record that is just like, that audience went nuts. And then in turn, the international audience of record buyers went nuts because they're like, I wish I was there. Like it's just a great moment, and it's so funky. It's like a jazz record, and Eddie Harris is a monster jazz saxophonist, but this isn't a jazz record. This is like just music. I don't know how to explain it. It just happens to be jazz adjacent, you know?
Dude, I love Eddie Harris. My band covers I Need Some Money. That's one of my favorite tunes to cover, man. Because even if no one knows what the hell it is, it's so funky and it's so fun. It's just, you know what I mean?
You want to hear a wild thing about Eddie?
Sure.
The very first single he ever put out in 1961 on VJ Records called Exodus. It's like a theme from a movie that was a current movie in the late 50s, early 60s. Very first thing he ever released, a 45 instrumental, sold 1 million copies.
What?
Yep. It's a massive hit.
What year?
And in the entire 60s is filled with instrumental Watermelon Man by Herbie. Yeah. You know what I mean? Sidewinder by Lee Morgan. Compared to What by Les McCann and Eddie Harris. There were so many instrumental hits in the 60s, and they're just now just gone.
Yeah, they're nowhere. Oh, yeah. That sucks. What year was that you said in the 60s?
61 on VJ Records. And it was just a smash. And then, of course, Miles on Miles Smiles does Freedom Jazz Dance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Eddie's brought into that, like, intellectual, like, top-tier jazz world. And as a player, I mean, all those funky things aside, Eddie could hang with anyone. Eddie could outplay anybody. I saw Eddie do something, actually, in Montreux. I had a gig in Montreux in 92, and Eddie was on this night of like the Atlantic Jazz Legends, and they had like Josh Redman and Gerald Albright and like this whole like current roster of like, they all soloed over Cherokee, and Eddie went last, and he quoted solos of all the guys before him. And then he soloed. He's from Chicago. Like that, apparently Chicago guys will rip you apart. And then yeah, he was amazing.
What an ear that guy had. Holy shit, dude.
Eddie was probably the best musician, like pure musician I ever. I mean, I got to play with him a couple times, and it was like, you know, it wasn't the jazz stuff. It was like the funks. He liked my groove playing. But I always tried to throw in some of these. Don't do that jazz shit. Like he's like, you're. I don't. This is. It's not about that. And I'm like, I studied it though. Like I know it. You know.
Yeah, that's
That's the
awesome.
frustrating thing about electric bass. It's just like jazz. It's nah. All right.
Right.
So back to the
Cool.
list. Back to the
Yeah.
list. So 5B might surprise you because I don't know if you're going to know this music, but you're from near Baltimore-ish, right?
Yes.
Does go-go music mean anything to you?
Hell yeah, it's the DC sound, man.
Okay.
Chuck Brown.
Thank you. So it's not a Chuck Brown record, but it's a Trouble Funk record.
Oh, okay.
Saturday Night Live. And it's a hard to find record. You probably can listen to it on YouTube. It is just like, I just imagine like everyone in Trouble Funk making this record, like also having like AK-47 strapped around them. It is like, it's so funky and aggressive and just the perfect snapshot of what go-go music is and can be. I mean, it's a genre that really exists in its best form live.
Mm-hmm.
That record like made me, I think it came out in the mid 80s. Like I learned every note of that record and he's slapping and he's like, all this really funky bass shit. So that record, it's not a record that a lot of people talk about. You have to be a certain age because go-go music really just happened for like a blip and then vanished.
Yeah.
And Trouble Funk was a thing for a minute. And I'm from Philly, so like go-go music made its way up a little bit to the Northeast, but it really stayed regional. Wild thing is that Grover Washington?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
His song Mr. Magic is the basis for all go-go music. Because the rhythmic motif from it, dun 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 that thing is go-go. Dun, sa, dun, dun, dun,
Yeah.
So Philly birthed go-go in a way. Like
That's
the
crazy.
Philly, yeah, Grover is as Philly as it gets. So yeah. Region.
That's dope. Yeah, I mean, go-go music is still kind of alive in Baltimore. There's a couple.
I know.
Yeah, there's still a couple of bands around here that I'm friends with that they do that thing. So they have a percussionist and a drummer.
Yep.
And you hear it right away, man. Once that groove kicks in, and everybody loses their mind, no matter what. No matter how white you are, you can't.
All of a sudden, the whitest dude on earth is finding 2 and 4. Like, it's like you're actually finding 2 and 4. I'm so proud of you. Yeah.
Like that music's killer, man. It's killer.
So that's just like spectacular stuff. All right. So I'm trying to think. All right. So number 4 isn't an album. It's a greatest hits. And my choices are also based on, because these records existed, a whole legion of other things exist after them. So I have to throw in the Gap Band. Gap Band Gold. None of the ballads. I hate ballads. Up-tempo, funky stuff. Tulsa, Oklahoma, Something Was in the Water. Those guys are, I mean, honestly, they're the funkiest band ever. They are the funkiest band ever. Because they hit songs, unbelievable combination of synth bass and real bass and drum. Like, I'm sorry. There's a reason why all these pop hits right now, they exist because the Gap Band existed. Like Uptown Funk and Bruno Mars, all that. They had to give up publishing to the Gap Band because they sniped them so hard on Uptown Funk. They actually, they stole a melody from Whoops Upside Your Head. Like they had to give up writer's share.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. I forgot about that, dude.
Gap Band. That's a DNA of a certain kind of pop dance music. Nothing is better. All right.
It's funny because have you heard Dave Grohl talk about that? Dave Grohl always talks about like how he stole.
Yeah. Well, and he's from DC. I mean, I know it's not like a go-go thing, but if you're a drummer and you're from suburban DC in the 70s and 80s like him, you're going to be hip to the Gap Band, all the go-go music, and all that punk music. No wonder he is what he is. Like,
totally.
It's like a Malcolm Gladwell kind of, like his 10,000 hours were like right ensconced, like steeped in that. Okay, so three is a Sly and the Family Stone record, but not with the original lineup. It's I think it's 1974. It's the record Fresh. Do you know that record?
I don't. I'm writing all these
Write
down.
this down.
All right.
So Fresh is Andy Newmark and Rusty Allen replacing Greg Errico and Larry Graham as the rhythm section. Sly, the original Family song, disbanded, I think, because Sly wasn't giving them credit, and there was just falling out, a lot of drug use. Everything was crazy. The record Fresh is just ridiculously funky. I mean, it's just like the sloppiest, funkiest record ever. And the reason why I choose it is because it's the direct line. You don't get D'Angelo if this record isn't made. Like Voodoo and Brown Sugar, the first two D'Angelo records in particular, they have that DNA of Sly because of the vocals and the Worley and Rhodes playing and just that whole thing. Fresh is a record that you have, if you're this kind of musician, you have to have a moment through it. You have to have, like all you do is listen to it for 2 months kind of thing.
Okay. I just wrote it down, man. I'm going to be listening to this stuff.
So, all right. Number 2 is a box set. And I posted about it yesterday. It's Star Time, the James Brown box set. Because for like that period where funk doesn't turn into that like greasy, slower, like, sort of jangly 70s thing, James Brown really, and that band, they invented the whole thing. Like, everything starts with the Famous Flames and the James Brown band, and that box set is like a masterclass in horn arranging, bass and drum, interplay, like, rhythm section work, unbelievable showmanship. Like, it's just maddeningly funky. It's so amazing.
So how big was his horn section on that? Like usually
4-piece.
Okay.
So it would be like 2 trumpets, trombone, and tenor or alto. Sorry, alto. I saw. It's funny. I took note of that yesterday because I posted a clip on my Instagram account, and I was just like, "Oh, that's it's hitting that staccato thing is so hard because it's 2 trumpets, and it's Maceo on alto and a trumpet and Fred Wesley. So it's just, there's no there. At least on the live band in '72, it was four horns. I don't know if it was always that way in the studio, but usually it was like Maceo taking solos and he's an alto player. You would be on alto.
Yeah. What's weird about that when you posted that whole like turning on a dime thing? It's like, that's why I asked you. I was like, I wonder if that's like where Krantz got his little shtick there, because I mean, dude, I've never seen. In fact, when I was still living in Boston, he came through with Cliff Almond, and I want to say it was Tim LaFave that night. I think it was Tim.
Probably, yeah. He's played with them a lot over the years, so I would.
Yeah, I saw Wayne with Anthony Jackson too in DC. Yeah. Oh, damn! But that was the time. That was like the first time I saw Wayne live. I never got a chance to see him at the 55 bar. I would love to have seen him.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, so like that was the first time I kind of was trying to watch for how they do those cues of like turning on a dime, and then I actually interviewed him that night for Berkeley.
Oh, nice.
And he was kind of explaining to me after the fact that whole thing of how he does the like up, 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 or down, down. Oh. So like when they're playing, he's basically, they work in 4-bar phrases.
Right.
So like, if there's like they're blowing over 16, right? And at the end of that 16, if he's like, down, down, if it's a really super up thing, they like, whoo, just drop it, just boom. And like whoever the drummer is has to establish that groove, and like they have to catch on within half of measure.
Right.
So I was like, oh damn. But I'm wondering if he got that idea from his record.
In the case of the James Brown thing, they just cut the time in half. It's just the tune that they're coming out of is so up tempo. It's like ba 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 ba. So they cut the time in half. Knowing the way Krantz thinks, I can see how that could be like an entry point. But then like he's taking it to this place where odd meters and like it's a whole other like. So maybe the concept. it's funny. I can't think of Wayne Krantz as like sitting down and being like listening to James Brown. Like I don't think of him as that kind of player, but I'm sure
He
he
loves funk. Like,
yeah, I'm sure he absolutely, was obsessed with it. But
man, he's one of
my
my favorite guitar players.
what's
So
that?
he's one of my favorite guitar players.
Yeah,
because he's so different. You
yeah,
know? So
he's truly original. And it's funny, I've seen him a number of times with different I've seen him with Tim, and do you know Zach Danziger, the drummer Zach Danziger?
Yep.
I've seen that trio, and I have to be really honest. After about 15 minutes, I like need a Valium.
It's heavy, dude.
Like, it drives me insane. Like it's really a lot. Like I think it would be more fun to play than to listen to. I think. You
Yeah.
know.
I've gotten out of breath before watching them because I feel
Yeah,
like I'm holding my breath.
it's harrowing. It's harrowing. Yeah, you got to be in it for real. Like you're there for just let it go.
You're there for a ring modulator for a while. It's not for everybody. I get that for sure.
It's not, but it is also like when you catch it at the right time, when you're in the right mood, it's colossal. I mean, they're amazing.
Yeah, man.
And
anyway, I got sidetracked.
No. Speaking of amazing and colossal, the number one funkiest, and it's another live album. Actually, I think about this real quick. Les McCann and Eddie Harris, Trouble Funk, the James Brown. A lot of that stuff is live. Sly and Gap Band were not, but live is Donny Hathaway live.
I knew it. I knew that was going to be it. Oh my God, that record just destroys everything.
It's cut at two different venues and two different coasts and two completely different audiences. It's seamlessly put together, and it is just, for me, the height of good songs mixed with unbelievably funky arrangements, mixed with unbelievable playing, and a band really listening. Really, really, really fucking listening to each other. It's not about, what would you say, like unbelievable virtuoso playing. Like, it's just every note works on it. Donny Hathaway live is the kind of blue of funk, in my estimation.
Totally, dude. That's oh my God, yeah. I mean that record for me was life changing for sure.
Yeah.
Hearing man, can you imagine what would he be doing right now if he was still alive? Like, I mean, I cannot imagine what kind of music would be released these days with the way technology has changed, with everything. Like, it's just that music, everything is everything, man. It's like everything on that record is so on point. I mean, the Ghetto alone, like if you just listen to that, it's like you're saying, it's like a symbiotic relationship going on musically between every single person on that stage.
100%. And the version of What's Going On.
Oh God. I mean, you got a friend.
Yeah, and if you think about it, and maybe it just didn't dawn on you, those are tunes that were just recently released. Like he was doing current songs.
Right.
Because the record is like, it's like 1973, this album. To reinvent a Marvin Gaye song and make it yours in the haze of Marvin Gaye, like literally within that, like that time period, unbelievable.
It's like that story of Hendrix in the UK and how all those cats like Clapton and Paul and all those guys came out to see him, and it was right after Sgt. Pepper came out and he was playing Sgt. Pepper, like the first song he opened with it, and it had just come out.
Yeah,
that's ballsy, man.
Yeah, but you know what? It's really smart because it sent the message to all those guys. Like, think about it. All of these white English blues inspired guitarists, they met the guy who was a blues guy that then showed them like, oh, you think you're going to mess with our music? Check this out. And they all were like, oh my, they knew that like they had met their match,
Yeah, man. Adam, let me ask you this.
Yes.
So like, just to kind of segue into blues stuff, because like, honestly, like my heart is so there for like the blues, like, and obviously the Three Kings and all that stuff. I mean, Freddie King is one of my faves.
Yeah.
But like as far as like blues records, I mean, a lot of people talk about BB's Live at the Regal kind of thing. But like what's like your Mount Rushmore of like blues guitarists or blues records, do you think?
I gotta be real honest and say that I have a hole in my knowledge about like certain blues stuff. I'm more of a jazz and soul and gospel guy. And hopefully no one will take offense at this. I'm not the biggest guitar fan in the world.
That's smart.
I hate to say that. I would say that with my limited knowledge of blues stuff, the stuff that I know that has really like blown me away would be Freddie King, Gatemouth Brown.
Oh yeah.
Gatemouth Brown. The first time I heard like real Gatemouth Brown stuff, I was just like, you know what it is? I think I play a certain kind of bass. It's just not part of that world. Like when you come from this funk and rhythmic, like there's no like slap blues bass players. Like it's not a thing. You know what I mean? Like it's all about the guitar. So if it's all about the guitar, I'm just like, oh man, I'm just gonna be sitting back here. You know, like I always felt bad for like the Trouble, what was Double Trouble. Like it's a great trio, but it's just like it's just Stevie Ray. Like he just completely owns everything, and they're just there. You know.
I know.
They're really good though. They're really good at what they do. But so yeah, who else?
Well, dude, Charlie told me I took a lesson with Charlie like in 2011 maybe or 2012. Oh, wow. And it was one of the most inspiring things I've ever experienced, like in terms of like learning from a teacher.
Yeah,
he said one thing to me, man, that I will remember till the day I die. And I don't know if I told you this, but he told me, man, you don't want to be a mile wide and an inch thick, an inch deep. You want to be an inch wide and a mile deep.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, that just hit me hard. But he told me about Gatemouth, and he told me about, you know, Cornell and everything, Dupree. And and I was like, oh, because I mean, I grew up in white suburbia. I wasn't surrounded by this stuff. I wasn't exposed to it.
That's all. Well, I mean, like Cornell is someone that you really have to dig to, you know what I mean? Like he's playing on Aretha Records. He's playing with, you know, Donnie. He's a session guy. So like, you know, you really have to dig to learn who that is anyway. You have to be like literally crate digging and reading all the credits and like, you know, Eric Gale, you know, and Cornell Dupree, you know, they're session guys. Like you know, you're not going to really know them as like solo artists per se, you know, like a Gatemouth or a Stevie. Like I love Stevie Ray Vaughan. I don't know, like people kind of go, oh, you know, like I'm like that dude could really fucking play. Like I always loved what he did. I don't know.
I did too, man. Yeah.
And he had extreme respect. Every time I saw him play with BB or like any of the guys that could play, like you could just see the joy. Like there was a lot of love and respect in both directions, you know, with a guy like that. But yeah, man, I think I got so into samplers and playing a certain kind of bass, certain kind of production. I'm just like guitar for me. Like I'll tell you, you know, I did a lot of work with studio players, so I would like work with like. Have you ever heard of Hiram Bullock? Do you know who Hiram is?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, that's a dude that people like kind of sleep on. He was a monster guitar player that happened to do tons of just like pop record dates, similar to Cornell. Like Hiram, we would do like Japanese pop records together, and then he would go play, you know, 3 sets that night with his band and just tear the place apart. Like he could play anything. So I'm just, or like, you know, you talked about 55 bar. When I first started playing, I remember I would go down to 55 and see Stern, and that was like, you know, just like a kid, and I would, you know, it was so funny because in New York you could get into a bar when you were young in the 80s. You know, you know, just watch a show, don't drink, you know, but you
right.
So I would watch Stern, and it just like, I don't know, there's something about the guitar when it's played with that much information. I'm just like, oh man, I can only take like doses.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's an onslaught, man. Like
it's like spraying 16th notes sometimes. It just gets a little too much. I get it, dude. As a guitarist, I
yeah.
feel that hard. Like,
Give me
say something.
Yeah, give me Wah Wah Watson. Give me, I'm just started like who was Freddie Stone, like from Sly and the Family Stones.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Great, great rhythm player. I love rhythm players. Are you hip on Instagram or on socials to Ella Ray Feingold? Do you know who Ella Ray is?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, funk player.
She's like the best rhythm player. She plays with Erica Badu. She is like lights out rhythm player, like and it's the first person to be like, you don't want to hear me solo, like I'm here to just play
To
this
hold
part.
it down. Yeah,
Here's your part. I'm like, oh, I love it.
That's the most important thing, man. Anybody that I teach, and like, dude, you got to get your rhythm chops. You got to be able to stick in the groove and like lay down. And you got to be so deep in the pocket that you're covered in lint.
Yeah,
Like,
man.
you really do, man. That's the most important thing. Nobody's here to see you blaze a solo right now.
Nope.
Dude, my wife and I, when we were living in Boston, Adam, I
Yeah.
took her to Wally's one night, and she is not a jazz head. She doesn't care. Like, she suffers through going to a Wayne Krantz show with me.
Oh yeah.
But that night, we sat down. There was some young kid, probably younger than me at the time, because I went there when I was 28. So I was an old man compared to everybody. But this kid might have been 18, 19, playing at Wally's, and burning player, burning. And when he was done, my wife leaned over to me and she was like, "Hey, is it me, or did he just not say anything?"
Oh
And I
wow.
was like, "Oh shit, my wife just dropped some hard."
Yeah, my wife just sounded like Cannonball Adderley.
I was like, "Oh my god!" So it's like there's two moments in my life that I love her even more: is that day and the day I came home from the grocery store and she was listening to Jeff Buckley's "Grace" on vinyl in the house. So it was like, hell yeah!
I married up. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but dude, yeah, I mean, I feel that intensely as a guitarist. Well, tell me. So you were talking about gospel piano though. So before we go, give me like a couple cool gospel piano records I should check out too, because I love that stuff.
Man, okay. Well, this, you're talking about like there's like 80 years, 100
I
years
know.
to choose from.
I don't need to hear. I know about Corey Henry. That's too modern for me.
No. You got to listen to like. So it's weird. Gospel piano. There.
Or B3. I love B3, like gospel stuff with that too.
Well, you got to listen to Mahalia Jackson because she had this. She had this. And it's not burning playing. It's just really supportive, unbelievably musical playing behind her. So Mahalia Jackson stuff, Clara Ward, because those best players are playing behind vocalists. So you have to listen, you know what I mean? So you have to kind of know the jazz, the gospel singers, and then they have these great bands behind them. Because at the same time, there's also like, I'm just trying to think, like, there's New Orleans stuff that's reminiscent of like James Booker and long hair and
oh, I love that shit.
It's all an extension of gospel stuff. It just then it becomes like solo piano stuff. But then there's like more contemporized things. You mentioned Corey. It's like, do you know who oh man, he's gonna kill me because we were in Marcus's band together. Bobby Sparks. Do you know who Bobby?
I've heard the name, but I've never heard any music.
Oh, he used to play with Kirk Franklin, and Kirk Franklin is like a gospel singer but his whole thing is he has like a big. It's not a big band, but it's like a big gospel ensemble, and all the musicians are on the level of Bobby and Corey Henry, and it's like if you come through Kirk Franklin's, if you come through his filter, like you are like a lights out musician.
Wow.
So like Bobby Sparks is great, Corey is great. It's kind of weird. I don't think of gospel players as much as gospel singers and the bands that support them.
Right, like John Cleary is somebody I would talk about that I love listening to. Is that New Orleans-y, but still kind of flirts with the gospel thing.
No, at that point, so you got to listen to James Booker and Professor Longhair, and you said organ though. I'm trying to think. I mean, shit, for organ, you got to listen to Shirley Scott,
okay.
She was married to Stanley Turrentine. And those like slow numbers, those ballads, oh, she's unbelievable. Because there is a real correlation between what churches could afford and what kind of musician, like the organ kind of takes over in the 30s, and the B3, I don't know, I don't remember the exact year, but the organ becomes a thing that's like, it's church based. And then what do you want to do at night when you want to have some drinks? You want to hear an organ trio, like you go like a funky soulful. So all those guys that could play in the church would play in clubs, and they become Jimmy Smith, and they become Jimmy McGriff and Jack McDuff and the whole organ thing, and Shirley Scott, and the organ thing is, it's just so connected to the church, but also connected to jazz. And I was talking about the 60s and all these soul jazz moments that was usually based on organ music, these and piano, like Ramsey Lewis and that stuff. But organ, those, I'm just thinking like,
Root Down was a big, when I first heard that, I was like, oh shit.
That's, and it's there's something about it. It's so organic. It's so rooted in real stuff. And honestly, it's rooted in the blues. So it's like gospel and blues and soul and funk and jazz. And it's all about people going out to the club, having a couple drinks, and they don't want to hear giant steps. You know what I mean? Like, they're not there for homework. They are there to get away from work. And they are there that's their social free time. And, it's really funny. If you ever listen to like Branford Marsalis talk about this same kind of thing, he's like, no one wants to listen to giant steps. Like, you know what I mean? I do in my spare time, but like when you want to go and see music and enjoy it, it's just some other things work better. Like, that's an exercise and a technical exercise to learn. And it's amazing the way they did it. But you can't listen to 2 hours of that.
No, thank you.
It's like, like where do you how do you keep time? Like,
That's kind of how I feel about, I love, if I'm on an island, I love listening to reggae, but if I go to a show, I don't want to hear for an hour and 15 minutes. You know what I mean? Like,
I'll tell you what, I want to hear that more than a lot of other stuff. You know what I mean? I'll listen to that than maybe some of the other things we've even mentioned. But yeah, I know what you're saying.
It's crazy. I mean, that's why there's a bunch of different music. It's something for everybody. But man, dude, Adam, I think I asked you one thing on this list, and we just went in so many cool directions.
Oh my God, ask me anything you want. If we're
maybe you just have to come on again some other time, and we can just do another geek out. I don't know. But because I don't want to take up too much of your time. Tonight's a big night, so I want to get you back to your life tonight. So let's do the lightning round get down, because that'll be fun. So I'm going to put a metronome on, cruising altitude of 112 BPM for some suspense. And I'm going to ask you 10 questions. So you can, if you want, Adam, you can explain your answers. You don't have to. You can burn right through it if you want. But the first one is always the same. I'm probably going to keep it the same forever just because.
Okay.
Lennon or McCartney?
Oh, fuck you! That for an answer.
Yeah.
Young me was Lennon. Older me is McCartney.
Okay, cool. Clyde Stubblefield or James Gadsden?
Gadsden.
Okay. Philly or NYC?
Philly! I'm from Philly, man. I can't, fly, Eagles fly, man. I'm from Philly.
Hell yeah. P or J bass?
J bass.
Okay. Jamerson or Weeks?
Oh, next!
I had to do this to you. Had to.
Sorry, Willie. Jamerson set the table.
All right. So if you were gonna have Charlie play on a tune, he can only play bass or guitar. Which instrument would you have Charlie Hunter play?
Guitar. I'm the bass player.
Okay. All right. We already kind of touched on this, but Donny Hathaway live or Bill Withers Carnegie Hall?
Donny Hathaway live.
Okay, I figured.
Sorry, Bill. And I love Bill, but no.
Yeah. Worley or Rhodes?
Worley!
Okay.
Yeah.
Me too, man. What is it for you? Like, I want to hear what you think between those two instruments.
Whirly is just, I think when I hear Whirly, I think Ray Charles. I think What I Say, and you know what's funny? Whenever I make tunes, I just default to Whirly. There's something about Whirly. Just as a musician, I prefer playing it. I prefer how it sounds. Rhodes is amazing. Something about Whirly just hits my soul harder.
It has like a guttural, like mid-range throaty thing. I think that a Rose just doesn't get, you know. Salty or sweet?
Sweet.
Okay. Here's the last one, Adam. So sometimes this is the hardest, sometimes it's the easiest.
Well, it's not Jamerson and Wheat.
Yeah. So if you could choose one record, it doesn't have to be your favorite record of all time, but if you could choose one record to erase from your memory, just so you could go back and experience it for the first time again, what record would that be?
It's a very easy answer. Kind of Blue.
Oh, okay. Tell me why.
Because it is the best moment in recorded history, and I would like to re-experience the best moment in recorded history. I use the song Blue and Green as I have anxiety issues, and I'm a bad traveler. I don't fly very well. The song Blue and Green, in particular, from Kind of Blue, I use it when I'm about to have a medical examination or I'm being put under. I use it when there's turbulence on a flight. It is everything about Blue and Green there's not a wrong note within 200,000 miles of that record. Train and Bill Evans and Miles, it is genius. And it's the only time in the history of recorded music where I'm actually glad that Cannonball Adderley didn't take a solo on that tune. Because it didn't need what he does. It was an impressionistic, very, very dark. It was like listening to like a Monet painting or a Magritte painting. It is so surrealistic and impressionistic and perfect. It is perfection. That entire record, I know it sounds cliche, but Kind of Blue, it's the best 6 hours of recording history. Like they recorded over 2 sessions, and sessions were 3 hours long.
That's crazy.
And everything else is nonsense in comparison to me. It's
my God,
perfection.
I don't think that's cliche. There's a reason that record has the status it has in jazz history. So I don't think that's cliche at all.
You brought up your wife earlier saying like, he didn't say anything. And then she said, you walk in and she's listening to Jeff Buckley's soulful, beautiful record. When I put on Kind of Blue, I can't say enough about how much my wife hates jazz. When I put that record on, I could put it on in any section of any song. She immediately goes, "Oh, I like this."
Oh man, yeah.
Oh, this doesn't make me nervous, or this is pretty, or this feels nice. Like even So What, even when it,
yeah.
It's just that works for everyone. There's a reason it's sold 20 million records to date, or whatever the number is, 10, 20 million records. So yeah, I thought I would, that kind of record I would normally like, I could see how that could be hard for someone, but I don't know.
I've asked that question 185 times, I think now. And like, I've gotten repeats. The probably the most popular repeat is Dark Side of the Moon.
Oh, wow. So wait. No one has said like Debbie Gibson's greatest hits. I went a little too deep into the 80s annoying pop acts.
No, not at all. No, yeah, no, it's interesting, man, because there's people I've had on, like I had on, Gabe Dixon, who's the keyboard player in Tedeschi Trucks Band.
Yeah.
He's killing. Do you know about his solo music?
No, I know who he is. And I've sort of been in the same room as him a couple times, but I don't know his. I'll check it out.
Check out his own music, man. It's like the last couple EPs he's put out have been so good.
Wow, okay. And it's just under his name.
Gabe Dixon Band. Okay. Yeah, it's just Gabe Dixon now. His original band was the Gabe Dixon Band, and then he went completely solo. But
Okay.
The funny thing about him is I heard his music for the first time when I saw the movie The Proposal with Ryan Reynolds and Sandra Bullock.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
The
I know.
opening song is the Gabe Dixon Band. It's his
Good
song.
for him. That's a
Yeah.
great license. That's amazing.
Hell yeah, dude. Yeah, you should go check his music out. It's so good, dude. But anyway,
Absolutely.
Adam, man, thank you for hanging out with me. This has been so fun, dude. Let me pop up your links here. Is this the Motion Worker YouTube channel? BV popped up here, my
Yeah,
moderator.
you could put up my Instagram, like, or whatever. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Instagram. I
Yeah,
don't really engage with the YouTube stuff on any kind of regularity, but I'm kind of always on Instagram if folks want to stop
yeah.
by.
A lot of cool stuff on his page on Instagram. Definitely check that out. For everybody that's listening on Spotify or Apple Music, you can just head over to at Motion Worker. So it's MOCEANWORKER.
There we go.
And yeah, check it out. Adam, man, you are the man. I really appreciate you making some time. Anything to kind of promote? Like, you got anything coming out? Like, any records dropping that you produced or anything you're working on?
Yeah, I have a tribute to Les McCann that I did with the great, incredible piano player from Atlanta named Joe Alterman, who's an amazing, just acoustic piano player. We made this. We both worked with Les, and he was a dear friend and a mentor to us. And when he passed in late 2023, we got together and I said, hey, we should make a record that's a tribute to Les. So it's done now. We're waiting until April of next year to release it. So it's pretty premature, but I'll have snippets up on my socials, and it is just like, it's like a 60s soul jazz record that never got made. It kind of sounds like a live record. I did this, I programmed all these stuff. He is such a good piano player. Joe Alterman is like, he's like this little white Jewish kid from Atlanta, and he sounds like Ramsey Lewis and Ahmad Jamal had a kid. Like, it's just endless. And so I'm really excited about that record because we're going to be touring and we're going to be doing live gigs and festivals and like,
Hell yeah. I should get him on this show to talk to him about that.
oh,
Stuff
he's
too.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can connect you guys. He's a total like amazing musician. And so that's kind of the most exciting thing I got coming out. Like, I work on films and TV shows. Like, I'm not going to go into that.
That's the stuff I wanted to talk to you about too, because
Yeah.
I've done a little bit of sync stuff, a little bit of licensing.
Canon, like, but I can come back and we can talk about whatever you want. But like, I'm really excited about this record, and I'll send you. I have a version of it online for streaming only. I'll send it to you. I think you'll dig it, man.
Oh, hell yeah!
Killing piano play, but fun, like clubby '60s jazz, like clap your hands and kind of dance shit.
Hell yeah!
Really
hell
fun.
Yeah! That's awesome. Well, Adam, thanks again, buddy. Everybody else, take care of yourself. Take care of each other.
Let's save democracy, y'all. Let's save democracy.
Amen, brother. All right, see y'all.